Day by day, our magistrates' courts hear thousands of cases. In the name of the Queen, we meet together to seek justice.
You refused to pay the full first-class fare.
Of course.
What was Inspector Tupper's reaction to your refusal?
At first, I thought he was going to have a seizure. He wouldn't listen even when I found my ticket.
Now, you definitely showed it to him.
I waved it under his nose.
You don't think it's possible, in the confusion and the heightened atmosphere of the moment, that Inspector Tupper may not in fact have been aware that you'd found your season ticket?
Oh, he knew.
And when you tried to reason with him further?
He just got off the train. I had a long way to go, and I very nearly got off after him. I was so cross. It all seemed so unnecessary. And then he phoned through to my station.
Thank you, Miss Willis.
Mr. Rhodes?
You were sitting in a first-class compartment.
I pay for a seat, not the privilege of standing for 50 minutes.
Facts, Miss Willis, yes or no?
Yes.
When approached by the inspector, Mr. Tupper, you couldn't find your season ticket.
At first, I couldn't.
Then, since you couldn't even produce evidence of a second-class fare, Mr. Tupper asked you to pay the full first-class fare, and you refused.
He didn't ask. He damn well demanded. He wouldn't listen to me.
He then asked for your name and address again. You said your name was Smith and that you were in residence at the Stamney YWCA.
I've already explained I thought that was stupid.
Thank you. That's all, Your Worships.
Look, this isn't nearly as straightforward as you're making it out to be.
Any questions, Your Worships?
No questions.
Thank you, Miss Willis. You may stand down. This way.
Your Worships, anyone who uses commuter services must surely sympathise with Miss Willis. The overcrowding, the delays, the waiting about, the conditions generally are quite appalling. So little wonder that tempers fray and frustrations lead to conditions of this kind. The case against Miss Willis is travelling on the railway without previously paying a fare. Now, the facts of the case are that Miss Willis had paid a second-class fare, and she was quite prepared to pay the first-class excess. What more could she do? I would ask you, Your Worships, to say that the prosecution has not brought its case home, and I would ask you to dismiss the charge. Thank you.
We noticed that Mr. Sutton didn't state both charges, travelling on the railway without previously paying a fare and with intent to avoid payment, and also failing to give a correct name and address. And the disturbing fact is that you did lie to an officer of the railway. We agree that conditions were trying. However, we find this case proved. Is there anything previous?
One on 3rd of January 1969 at Marylebone. Fined £10 for using indecent language to the annoyance of residents.
Oh. What was that about, Miss Willis?
A traffic warden. I was trying to post a letter.
You obviously have a temper.
I can't stand petty officialdom.
We are going to fine you £5 on the first charge, 3 on the second, and £3 costs. Do you want time to pay?
I'll pay now and I'll pay cash.
The warrant officer will show you through.
Just come this way, please, miss.
Yes.
How did you do?
Not too well, I'm afraid. You had a previous you didn't tell me about. What have you got?
The usual.
Shoplifting?
Defended.
Who? Horton. Thought he'd retired. Good luck.
Number 16, Your Worship, Miss Diane.
Thank you.
You're asking for summary trial. You are,
Will you stand, please?
you are Diane Margaret Lindley.
Yes.
Mrs. Lindley, you are charged with an offence where you have the right to be tried by a jury at a higher court. But if you wish, you may be tried by the magistrates here. However, I must tell you that if you are tried here and found guilty, the magistrates, after hearing all about you, may decide to send you to that higher court for you to be sentenced there. Where do you want to be tried?
By the magistrate.
Very well.
The charge is that on Saturday, November the 25th, at Breslaw's supermarket in Stamley High Road, you stole 1 bottle of cologne, 1 lipstick, 1 container of deodorant. And it is said that the value of these items is £2 and 3 pence. You understand the charge?
Yes, I do.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
You may sit down, Mrs. Lindley.
Thank you.
Your Worships, this is a private prosecution. I represent Breslaws, who are the complainants. My learned friend, Mr. Horton, acts for the defendant. Your Worships, my case is that on the day in question, Mrs. Lindley was seen by a member of the security staff of the supermarket, Miss Mile, and another member of the staff, Miss Pegram, to secrete what in fact turned out to be a bottle of toilet water, a lipstick, and a container of deodorant into a shopping bag. She was then observed to pass through the desk, the cash desk, that is, without declaring the stated items to the cashier. Miss Mile will say that she observed Mrs. Lindley and followed her from the premises. She will tell you of how she confronted Mrs. Lindley and informed her of her suspicions and requested that she should return to the store to speak to the manager. After a great deal of procrastination, you will hear that Mrs. Lindley was searched, not at the supermarket, but at the local police station. And Police Constable Adele will say that the stolen articles were found in the accused's possession. I would like to call first Miss Mile.
Miss Mile. Miss Mile, please, Miss Betty Mile. Just go through and follow the usher.
I was watching her on the closed-circuit TV. At first, I thought she was just looking. She kept picking things up. She didn't look the type.
What happened then?
I saw her slip a bottle into her shopping bag.
But that's not true.
Your Worships must forgive Mrs. Lindley. She is anxious to get to the truth of the matter. She's not been in court before.
Are these items going to be produced, Mr. Miles?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Okay. Would you indicate to their worships the bottle that you say was taken?
Yes, that bottle in the center.
After you saw the defendant on the closed circuit, what did you do?
I maneuvered myself into a position where I could watch her. I saw her pick something else up. I couldn't see what it was clearly. She was half turned away.
Did she have a trolley with her?
A basket. A few bits and pieces in it, nothing much.
And then you followed her to the cash desk.
Mr. Myers, you are leading the witness.
The witness seems to be doing very well without assistance, Mr. Myers.
I'll rephrase that. After you saw the accused place the items in her bag, what did you do?
Followed her at a discreet distance and observed her at the cashier.
And?
She made no attempt to disclose the items in her shopping bag. She paid for the bits and pieces, put them in the shopping bag, and left.
Without paying for the articles that you had seen her put in the shopping bag?
Yes.
Then what?
Well, I followed her out into the street and approached her.
You stopped her?
Yes, introduced myself, made her conversant with my suspicions, and invited her to return to the shop.
And what was her reaction?
She laughed at me.
Laughed at you?
Told me I must have been mistaken.
So, what did you do?
Well, I said that if I was mistaken, I should apologize. She didn't even answer, just walked away.
And you?
Well, I wasn't going to let her just walk off, so I followed, stopped her, invited her again back to the shop. Well, this time she got a bit shirty.
How?
Well, I said if she wouldn't come back, could I just have a quick check in her bag? Just a quick look.
And she refused?
Oh, yes. Came on with all the old madam.
Can you be a little more specific?
Well, you know, I've never been spoken to like this before. I'll never shop at that place again. Quite honestly, I thought she was a bit... Well, you know.
What?
Well, you know, a bit odd.
Your Worship's my
That
learned
sort
friend
of
knows better
remark
than...
we can do without, Mr. Miles, unless, of course, you have any evidence to support it.
My apologies, madam.
Thank you.
What happened next?
Well, she moved away again towards the bus stop. And there was a bus coming. I didn't know exactly what to do, and then I saw Ron Odell.
Police Constable Odell?
Yes. He stopped the bus and got her off. He had a word with the conductor.
And what was the defendant's reaction to this?
Well, she seemed to take more notice of him. He got her back to the supermarket and upstairs, but she still wouldn't let us search her bag.
Who was present?
Just the three of us and Mr. Garnon, the manager. He tried to be ever so nice to her.
But she was adamant.
Oh, yes. Couldn't do a thing with her. She started getting upset.
In what way?
Well, she sort of half fainted. Well, not really, sort of giddy. We sat her down.
But you still didn't manage to search her bag?
No, she held on to it. So P.C. Odell took her down to the station. And they did there, but it took them a while.
Miss Miles, when you followed and approached the defendant, there was no possible doubt in your mind that she had stolen the articles in question?
Your Worships, whether the defendant stole these articles is a matter for yourselves to decide, and not this witness.
I'll rephrase that. Are you quite sure that the defendant, Mrs. Linley, took the bottle of cologne and the other items which you could not then identify, put them in her shopping bag, and left the supermarket without paying for them?
I saw her.
Just one more question, Miss Miles. Was the bottle of cologne and the other items handed to you by the police?
Yes, that lipstick and that container of deodorant.
And you can identify them?
Yes, they still have the sales tickets on them.
Thank you, Miss Miles. Mr. Hawken?
Miss Miles, isn't it?
Yes.
Unusual name. It was a Saturday?
Yes.
Busy day in a supermarket.
Yes.
Very crowded, lots of people. In and out, lots of movement. Confusion.
I wasn't confused.
How many security people were there on the floor that day?
Just me.
In such a huge place?
Well, it's not all that big.
6,112 square feet. I checked. Wouldn't you call that huge?
Well, there are several supervisors and all the staff watch out. We have the latest closed-circuit system.
Oh, yes. That's where you claim you first saw Mrs. Linley. How big would you say the screen is? 18 inches? Less?
About that.
So the people on the screen are very small and the picture rather grey and grainy?
I've got used to that.
And you maintain you saw Mrs. Linley in a crowd, put a small bottle in her bag?
Well, it wasn't all that crowded. And the revolving cameras are on the ceiling. That's quite an angle. I saw her.
Are you sure you saw her at all?
How do you mean?
Isn't it true that your attention was drawn to Mrs. Linley by Miss Pegram? She called you over and pointed out Mrs. Linley to you?
No. I did talk to Miss Pegram, but that was afterwards. She told me that she'd seen that it... Oh, but of course, I'm not allowed to say that. That's hearsay.
How long have you been doing this sort of work?
4 years.
So by now you should be pretty observant, know what to look for.
Yes.
That Saturday, whilst you were observing Mrs. Linley, did you see a young woman in a bright green coat with 2 children?
I can't...
Think carefully. One of the children, a girl of 13, was a hydrocephalic. Well?
I can't recall.
You do know what a hydrocephalic is?
No.
Fluid on the brain, an enlarged head. Very sad. Quite often the children are retarded.
I can't remember.
Were you observing Mrs. Lindley for some time?
I was.
Then you can confirm that Mrs. Lindley was only in the supermarket for approximately 15 minutes, and that most of that time was taken up in conversation with Mrs. Shaw and her daughter Eileen. Eileen is a hydrocephalic. Mrs. Lindley teaches educationally subnormal children. Eileen had been one of her pupils.
Thank you, Mr. Horton.
I do remember the girl vaguely.
Just in time.
I must protest, Your Worships. My learned friend should not make comments on the witness, far less be offensive.
Forgive me, Your Worships. I was merely pleased that I was able to prompt a recollection from the witness.
Please, gentlemen.
As you have remembered the girl, perhaps you can recall the other child. Boy of about 4, with red hair.
Only vaguely.
Bit of a scallywag, apparently.
Young kids are a nuisance.
Into everything at that age?
Yes.
Isn't it true, Miss Mile, that kids tend to play with the bottom 2 shelves because they can't reach any higher?
Yes. But I know for a fact that the lipsticks were up high, top shelf, on display packaging.
Yes, but isn't it also true that this particular display packaging was quite useless? The lipsticks kept dropping down through the holes in the cardboard onto the bottom shelf, which was protrudes. Isn't that so, Miss Mile?
1 or 2 may have.
1 would have been enough.
Madam, this is speculation. Perhaps a lipstick fell down. Perhaps a child was playing.
I intend to produce a witness.
I suggest we get on with it. At this rate, we'll be here all morning.
The truth takes time, or were you wanting to get away quickly?
I don't need to remind you, gentlemen, that all observations should be addressed to the bench.
Miss Mile, when you first approached Mrs. Lindley, what did you say to her?
I introduced myself, made her conversant with my suspicions, and invited her back to the supermarket.
Made her conversant with my suspicions. Isn't that a little stiff? A little cold?
Well, you have to be careful what you say.
Do you?
And what you do. You can't force them to come back with you or search their bag without their permission.
I should hope not.
They nearly always deny everything.
You apprehended Mrs. Lindley in the middle of the street?
I approached her.
Very well. You approached her in the middle of a crowded high street and told her you suspected her of stealing.
No, I didn't put it like that.
How did you put it?
Well, not like that.
What did you expect Mrs. Lindley to do?
Well, if she was innocent, to come back with me and prove it.
Instead, she laughed at you.
Yes.
Came on with all the old madam.
Well, she did.
Only when you asked her if she would open her bag there and then in the middle of a crowded high street of a town where she'd lived and worked and been respected for 52 years.
Well, we could have gone into a shop doorway or something.
Miss Mile, haven't you any sense of dignity?
Your Worship,
I don't think that question's very constructive. Do you, Mr. Horton?
Thank you. My apologies. Do you know Constable Odell?
Yes.
I mean, personally.
Yes.
May one ask how?
I just know him.
You were yourself in the police force, I believe.
Yes.
You resigned.
4 years ago.
May one ask why?
I cannot see what this has to do with the case before us, madam. No doubt Miss Mile had good reasons for her decision 4 years ago.
I'm trying to test the credibility of this witness, Your Worship.
In what way, Mr. Horton?
If Miss Mile would answer my question, it might explain it.
Miss Mile?
A mix-up.
What do you mean?
In court.
In what way?
Perhaps I might be permitted...
Do you want to pursue this, Mr. Horton?
No, I don't think so. No more questions.
Do your worships have any questions for this witness?
No questions.
You may stand down.
This way.
I now call Police Constable Adele.
Please, Adele. Easy on down, please. Please transfer down.
What did you do when you got back to the store?
Once we had got to the manager's office, we thought it would be easier.
And it wasn't?
No, sir. Mrs. Lindley just hung onto a bag. I tried my best, so did Mr. Garnon.
None of you were in any way threatening or aggressive?
Quite the opposite.
How did Mrs. Lindley behave?
We thought she might not be well, sir.
Can you be more explicit, Constable?
Just a feeling I had.
I'm sure the court would be interested.
The lady appeared to be under stress. She was saying strange things.
Such as?
Religious things, about truth, being a servant of God.
But she still refused to let you search her bag?
Yes. Mr. Garnon seemed reluctant just to let her go, so I suggested that she accompany us to the police station, where she finally allowed us to look in her bag.
And what did you find?
Madam? Yes. 1 tin of soup, half a pound of butter, 1 packet of soup, 1 jar of fish paste, 1 packet of jelly, 1 tube of mustard, 1 carton of mushrooms, 1 bottle of eau de cologne, 1 deodorant, 1 lipstick, 1 headscarf, and some trading stamps.
Those 3 articles alleged to have been stolen from the supermarket were definitely in Mrs. Lindley's bag?
Yes.
Thank you, Constable.
Mr. Horton, would you say that Mrs. Lindley was angry at Miss Miles' accusation?
Not angry, sir.
Indignant?
A little.
Astonished?
Yes.
Apart from refusing to have her bag searched, was she in any other way obstructive?
Not really, sir.
She didn't pull away or try to argue with you?
Not argue, sir. Explain.
That it was a mistake?
Yes.
You said earlier that Mrs. Lindley was saying strange things.
Yes.
Can you remember any of them specifically?
Well, not specifically.
Would one of the things she said have been, "I always try to tell the truth. God is my witness to that. I have never so much as stolen a match in my whole life. God knows I despise dishonesty no matter what sort"?
She did say something like that.
And you consider that a strange thing to say?
Not that.
But a few moments ago, you were saying that Mrs. Lindley was under stress, strain, saying strange religious things.
She mentioned God a lot.
A sad indictment of society when a person who freely voices their commitment to Christianity is regarded as strained, under stress, or what was it Miss Miles said? A bit odd.
Is that a question, madam, or a statement, or what?
A reflection, your worships. No more, no less. When you found the cologne, the lipsticks, and the deodorant, what was Mrs. Lindley's reaction?
Disbelief, sir.
What did she say?
Nothing, sir. She was so upset we thought it best to get her home.
Would you say, Constable, in your experience, that Mrs. Lindley's distress was genuine?
Mr. Horton is asking for an opinion, madam.
Not 5 minutes ago, my learned friend was suggesting that the court would welcome Constable Odell's opinion.
Can you answer this question?
Not really, madam.
When 3 days later you went to Mrs. Lindley's to inform her that Breslaw's intended to prosecute, what was her reaction then?
She seemed much more composed, totally convinced that everything could be explained.
Thank you, Constable. That is exactly what I intend to do.
You may stand down. Mr. Miles?
Miss Pegram.
Pegram. Miss Pegram, please. Miss Linda Pegram. You just go through, please, and follow the house. This is Shaw. Is that Shaw? Yes. It's all right. You'll be the next one. Oh,
And then what happened?
Well, and then when I saw what Miss Mile had already seen, I thought, well, not much point in telling her I'd seen her too, so I didn't. Well, not then anyway, I did after.
You definitely saw the defendant steal those items from the supermarket?
Yeah, I saw her. Well, so did Betty, Miss Mile.
Thank you, Miss Pegram.
Mr. Horton, did Mrs. Lindley come to your kiosk to purchase anything?
No.
Are you sure? Think back carefully. This is important.
No,
Not to purchase a certain type of pipe tobacco?
we don't sell pipe tobacco.
Isn't this what really happened, Miss Pegram? Mrs. Lindley came to your kiosk to purchase some pipe tobacco. She put her shopping bag down on the floor. You, looking down, saw the items at the bottom of her bag and became suspicious. When Mrs. Lindley had gone, you called Miss Mile over and imparted your suspicions to her. Isn't that how it really happened?
No, it's not. Not any of it.
How did you know that Miss Mile had already seen Mrs. Lindley?
I just knew.
Telepathy? I want an answer.
You must answer the question.
I just knew.
You just knew. Well, perhaps you can answer this question then. Do you remember a young woman in a bright green coat with 2 young children, one of them retarded, that morning?
The little girl with the big head?
Yes.
Yeah, I often see her with her mum. She's nice.
Do you remember her there?
Smokes menthol. I can't stand them, like cleaning your teeth.
Did Mr. Garnon, the manager, ask you to come here today?
He didn't have to. It's part of the job. I don't like thieving of any sort.
Strange.
What?
That is precisely what Mrs. Lindley said to Mr. Garnon. Is it true, Miss Pegram, that assistance in catching and prosecuting shoplifters at Breslaw's is encouraged, part of the promotion process?
I don't know.
I think you do.
Really,
What
I
if
must
it is?
protest. First Miss Mile, now this
No more
witness.
questions.
No question.
Thank you, Miss Pegram. This way. Mr. Mars?
That is my case, Your Worships.
Mr. Horton?
I have only 2 witnesses, Your Worships. I would first call Mrs. Shaw.
Mr. Shaw. Mrs. Shaw, please. Let's go through. Just follow the usher.
Eileen loved Mrs. Lindley. Cried when she had to go to a proper school.
And that was the first time you'd met for a year.
Over a year.
So you talked for some time.
Well, she talked mostly to Eileen. She's like that. So kind. Do anything for kids, she would. Bloody disgusting all this is.
Where were you when you were talking? Whereabouts in the supermarket?
Near the vegetables. I was looking for some fresh parsley, but they don't
Yes.
got the
Would that be near the new cosmetic section?
Just down a bit. Terry was playing around there. So.
You saw him?
Oh, yeah, you need to watch him. He's got 6 pair of hands.
He was playing. With what?
Well, you know, bottles and things on the shelves.
Did you notice a display on the top shelf?
Well, the lipsticks.
Yes. Did you notice anything unusual
Unusual.
about the actual display packaging?
Oh, yeah, well, some of them were torn and the lipsticks were dropping out.
Onto the floor?
No, you know how the bottom shelf sticks out? Well, some of them had fallen in, you know, with the bottles.
Bottles of cologne?
Yeah.
Quiet, please.
Please continue, Mr. Horton.
During your conversation with Mrs. Lindley, did anything happen?
Oh, yeah, Terry knocked her shopping bag over. You know, she'd put it down and he'd been playing with it and knocked over.
Didn't she object?
Oh, no, of course not. Well, I did tell him off, but she said it only got her scarf and gloves in it and they couldn't come to no harm, so let him play with it.
Mrs. Shaw, have you ever had to return articles to shops, supermarkets?
Yeah, I have, about 6 times now. It's Terry, you know, he will play with things.
Can you give an instance, specifically and briefly?
Well, last month when I got him home, I found he got 4 tins of bootblack stuff down his trousers.
He'd been playing with them.
Yeah, you know, he's one of them kids, always into everything.
And you say there have been other instances?
Well, yeah, there was another time when he put a shoe, just the one shoe, in my bag. And, of course, when I took it back, I was so embarrassed. You know, they'd been looking everywhere for it.
In your bag?
Yeah, I wasn't looking and he stuffed it in my shopping bag.
Mrs. Shaw, do you think it possible that Terry put these small items into Mrs. Lindley's bag while you were talking?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, how else could they have got there? And I can tell you one thing for sure, and that's Mrs. Lindley never stole them. And anyone that says she did's a bloody liar.
Please, Mrs. Shaw.
I'm sorry, but it just makes me so mad.
Last few questions, Mrs. Shaw. You had your talk and then you separated.
Yeah, I went off to get some meat, and on my way back past the tobacco kiosk, I saw her, and sorry, I can't remember their names, but, well, they were talking anyway. And so
Are you sure?
Oh, yeah, I overheard them saying something about in her bag, you know, and something about old girl in
This,
a fur
of course,
coat
is hearsay, Your Worships.
The object of this evidence is to show that there was a discussion between the two prosecution witnesses before an approach was made to my client.
Very well, Mr. Horton. Proceed.
Thank you, madam. How did you know they were talking about Mrs. Lindley?
Well, she was the only one in there with a fur coat on. You know, it's ever so old, but, well, she says it keeps her nice and warm still. So. Anyway, I never thought no more about it.
You left the supermarket before Mrs. Lindley.
Yeah, I must have.
Both Miss Pegram and Miss Mile insist they had no occasion to talk to one another before Mrs. Lindley left the supermarket.
Well, I saw and heard them, just like I said, them two over there.
One last question, Mrs. Shaw. Do you know Mrs. Lindley well?
Oh, well, she's one of the kindest people you could ever wish to meet, and honest as the day is long. And there's a lot of people in this district like me and my husband who owe a lot to Mrs. Lindley, and I'm disgusted with all this.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw.
Please stay where you are. Mr. Myers?
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes?
did you see your son place those articles in Mrs. Lindley's bag?
Well, he must have, mustn't he? It's obvious.
This court is only interested in facts, Mrs. Shaw, not must-haves. Perhaps you didn't understand my question. Did you see your son place those articles in Mrs. Lindley's bag?
No, but I can
Thank you,
imagine
Mrs. Shaw. Now, you say that Mrs. Lindley said your son could play with the bag.
Yes, she did.
As far as you could see at that time, there were only her gloves and scarf in it.
Yes.
Tell me, Mrs. Shaw, how was Mrs. Lindley when you met?
How do you mean?
She well?
Said she was a bit tired.
Depressed?
No.
Did she seem in any way a bit vague?
No, she's just a bit tired. She works too hard.
When did you hear about this case?
Later that day when Mrs. Lindley rang me.
Now, why would she do that? When you hadn't met for over a year, you can hardly say that your relationship was intimate.
Oh, I suppose she wanted some help.
Did she say she wanted help?
No, not like that.
Not like that. But, she sounded distraught.
Well, I mean, wouldn't anyone be with this going on?
And you decided to help her.
Because I remembered Terry playing with her bag.
Did Mrs. Lindley remind you that your son was playing with her bag?
No, we just talked over what had happened, you know.
And you decided that Terry was the culprit?
Look, I've told you, he's done this sort of thing so many times before.
And did you tell Mrs. Lindley this?
Yes.
Before or after she reminded you that Terry was playing with her bag?
Don't really remember, I mean, just talk things over generally. What difference does it make, anyway?
A great deal of difference.
Is Mr. Myers suggesting that Mrs. Lindley told Mrs. Shaw what to say?
Not at all. All I'm trying to do is to discover where the suggestion that the child could have put the articles in Mrs. Lindley's bag emanated from.
Well, look, I've told the truth, and all I know is that my boy's done this sort of thing several times before. I mean, doesn't it seem funny that the first time I see Mrs. Lindley in over a year that this should happen? Well, I mean, doesn't it?
No more questions.
Any questions, Your Worships?
No questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you.
What is your religion?
Christadelphian.
A free church?
Yes.
Will you take the oath or affirm?
Affirm?
Will you take the oath?
Oh, yes, but...
Yes?
May I use my own Bible?
Well...
Is there some problem?
The witness wishes to use her own Bible, Your Worship.
Would that be all right?
Yes, that'll be all right now.
Yes, if she wishes.
Thank you.
Will you please take it in your right hand and repeat the words on the card?
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give in this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Your name is Diane Margaret Lindley, and you live at 62 Bedenwell Close.
Yes.
And you are a teacher.
Yes.
Mrs. Lindley, you have heard the evidence of the prosecution witnesses?
Yes.
Did you steal those articles?
Of course not.
Have you ever stolen anything?
Never. Ever, Mr. Horton, never.
Tell me, Mrs. Lindley, do you use Breslau's often?
No. No, not at all. I don't really like supermarkets. I find them impersonal, rather antiseptic. But this particular Saturday, it was convenient. I was in rather a rush. My son, Peter, and his wife.
Thank you, Mrs. Lindley. You met Mrs. Shaw there?
Yes, and Eileen was telling me all about her new school. She's doing very well.
And her boy played with your bag?
Well, he's an inquisitive child, and he needs encouragement. Inquiring minds should be encouraged.
Quite. Then later, when you and Mrs. Shaw separated?
Yes, well, I was in rather a rush, so I couldn't stay long. My neighbour, Mr. Hill, well, it was his birthday on Monday, and I always give him a tin of tobacco. But they didn't sell pipe tobacco, the young lady told me.
That would be Miss Pegram.
Yes.
Then you left, went to the cashier and to pay for what was in your basket.
Yes.
Now, you've heard what Mrs. Shaw said about her son.
Yes, and I didn't ask her to. She volunteered to come here today. She insisted.
We understand. If for a moment we accept that that was what happened, when you put your bits and pieces of groceries into your shopping bag, wouldn't you have noticed these other items at the bottom of your bag?
Well, I didn't. I suppose I must have been in such a rush. I didn't notice anything. I just dropped them in.
So you had no idea that when you left Breslau's supermarket you were in fact leaving with unpaid goods?
Good gracious, no idea.
Now, coming to outside the supermarket, Mrs. Lindley, in the street, will you tell us what happened there?
Well, it was dreadful. Embarrassing. I knew a bus was due, and they only run every 25 minutes. I didn't want to miss it. I was already late.
Miss Mile approached you?
Yes, and she grabbed my arm and swung me round. It was quite frightening.
You heard what Miss Mile said in her evidence?
Yes, I heard her, but... Well, I'm sorry, but I don't remember it like that at all.
How do you remember it?
Well, she wanted me to go back into the supermarket. I tried to explain that I was late, the bus, but she wouldn't let go of my arm. I told her that she must be mistaken. You see, I didn't know who she was. She hadn't told me. So I walked away. But she came after me and got in front of me. Well, I didn't know where to put my face. I told her again that she was mistaken. And then she asked to look in my bag. Well, by this time, people were stopping and looking and listening and laughing. And they thought it was funny, listening to those foul accusations.
Are you all right, Mrs. Lindley?
Wouldn't you like to sit down, Mrs. Lindley?
No. No, thank you. I'm quite all right.
We can quite easily get you a chair.
I prefer to stand.
So, then what happened?
Well, by this time a bus was coming, so I ran to catch it, and she followed me. The next thing I knew, a constable was asking me to get off. Well, he was very polite, but he insisted that I went back to Breslau's. I tried to explain that I was late, but I was taken up to an office. Well, by this time, it had become a matter of principle. I am not a thief. God alone knows I may be many things, but I am not a thief, and I refuse to let them search my bag.
As a matter of principle.
Exactly. I didn't think they had any right, either legally or morally. They were mistaken.
Did you explain that to the manager?
Well, he was patronizing in the worst possible way. He treated me as though I was some crackpot old spinster out for a day's shoplifting. He went on and on about the thousands and thousands of pounds that they lose.
The constable suggested you went to the police station.
Yes, well, by this time it was getting very late, and my son Peter was arriving. I didn't want him to have to stay out, not in the cold.
So at the police station you allowed them to search your bag?
Yes.
Now, Mrs. Lindley, what did you think when they found the articles?
I felt sick.
You were surprised, were you not?
My stomach turned over, and all their faces suddenly changed.
The shock was so great, it was thought best to get you home.
Yes. When I did get home, I just sat. I didn't really know where I was. It all seemed so vague and distant, like shadows. The first thing I remember, it was the telephone. It was my son, Peter. They couldn't come. My grandson had croup. They'd been ringing all the afternoon, and I hadn't heard her. All this need never have happened. I need never have gone into that awful place after all.
It was then that you phoned Mrs. Shaw?
Yes, well, I felt I needed to talk to somebody I knew would be sensible.
Could you explain that?
Well, Mrs. Shaw is a very down-to-earth person. She speaks her mind. I thought she might say something that might give me some perspective on the situation.
It has been suggested that you contrived to manipulate evidence.
Well, that's not true. Mrs. Shaw might quite easily have said that she saw Terry put the things in my bag, but she didn't. She told the truth. Those two young ladies over there had never seen me steal anything. And how they can swear an oath on God's holy Bible and then tell such stories.
Mrs. Lindley, you stated that you are a Christadelphian by religion.
That's right.
Perhaps most of the people here would not have heard of that denomination.
We are brothers and sisters in Christ.
You are not ashamed of your belief?
Ashamed? I proclaim it wherever possible. Oh, I try not to be a bore or preach to people.
You live strictly by the tenets of the Bible.
Well, the Bible is true and holy. We must obey God's law if we're to stand at his right hand at the second coming.
And to steal would be to break God's law?
Most certainly.
Thank you, Mrs. Lindley.
Mr. Myers?
Mrs. Lindley, you say you left the supermarket with no knowledge of the stolen articles in your bag.
They were hardly stolen if a child put them there.
That is a hypothesis, Mrs. Lindley, and a very flimsy one, since there are two witnesses who have both stated that they saw you place those articles in your shopping bag.
Then why didn't the child find them when he was playing with my bag?
Simply because you hadn't taken them then, but after you separated from Mrs. Shaw, isn't that so?
It is not.
The truth is that you stole them, is it not, Mrs. Lindley?
I didn't steal anything.
For yourself? For presents? You have stated that you abhor dishonesty, that indeed it is against the Christian law by which you claim to live.
Yes.
Yet, when Miss Mile, only doing what she is employed to do, asks for your assistance in clearing up a possible misunderstanding, you refuse.
I was late.
You blankly refused.
If her approach had been different...
Are you now saying it was because of Miss Mile's approach that you didn't comply?
Oh, partly.
And not because you were late?
That too.
Or was it because you knew what was in your bag?
It was embarrassing.
Was it?
Out in the street.
Miss Mile invited you back into the supermarket, into the privacy of the office.
I hadn't done anything.
Surely it was you who was inviting the attention of the people passing.
No.
By not going in with Miss Mile.
She had no right.
She explained why she was asking.
Then she should have explained a little more succinctly.
Oh, come now.
I didn't know who she was.
She introduced herself.
I didn't hear.
Perhaps you didn't want to hear.
I listened to her.
And then just ignored what she was trying to say.
It was nonsense.
Was it? The articles were in your bag. Miss Mile was perfectly correct in stopping you.
It was impertinent.
She was doing her job.
She held my arm.
Only because you wouldn't listen to reason.
She was not being reasonable. I am not a shoplifter.
That remains to be decided, Mrs. Lindley.
If you knew me, you wouldn't make such...
When, with the assistance of a police officer, Miss Mile persuaded you back to the office, why did you not then comply?
I have already explained that.
A matter of principle.
Exactly.
But you've also said that you were in a mad rush. Wouldn't it have been more convenient to get it over with, though?
No, convenience is rarely synonymous with principle.
Very articulate, Mrs. Lindley, but it neatly avoids answering my question.
I thought it answered it rather well.
When Miss Mile approached you, what were you wearing?
Hmm?
Your fur coat?
Yes.
Your headscarf?
No. No, that was in the bag.
Your gloves?
Yes.
Oh, you were wearing your gloves?
Yes.
But you told Mrs. Shaw that both your scarf and gloves were in your bag.
Well, they were then.
I see you took them out.
Yes.
Before you filled your bag? Before you went to the cashier?
I don't remember.
Well, you were wearing them in the street. You've just said so.
No. No. I didn't have gloves. I remember now. Just the scarf.
Well, then Mrs. Shaw is telling lies.
I can't remember.
Is it not true, Mrs. Lindley, that if the child had hidden the articles in your bag, as you suggest, you would have discovered them when you took out your gloves and no doubt returned them? However, you did take out your gloves from the very bottom of your bag, and you did not return the articles. Only one conclusion can be drawn from this.
What's he doing here?
Who, Mrs. Lindley?
Him. Has he the right?
This is a public court, Mrs. Lindley.
But he's a reporter. He works locally. He keeps looking at me. Just like in the street, everybody looking. He's also public. Everybody looking. Just looking.
No more questions.
They're both liars.
You may stand down, Mrs. Lindley. Your worships, my client is, as you can see, highly distressed. I will be as brief as possible.
Miss Meyer said she saw me, but she didn't.
Will you come and sit down here, please, Mrs. Lindley? Here, please.
As your worships will have noticed, there does seem to be a conflict of evidence. Mrs. Lindley is a highly respected and hard-working member of the community. This is the first time she has appeared in court, and the first occasion on which she's had to answer questions of character. Mrs. Lindley lives alone, and there have been certain pressures.
It must have been
I feel
somebody
certain your worships
resembling
will
me.
wish to deal with this matter in a sympathetic
You were right, Robert. They are both liars. Confirmed liars. I didn't have any gloves. I don't wear gloves. I don't like gloves. It couldn't...
We find this case proved. Mrs. Lindley, we think it best to postpone our decision on what course of action to take, and we're going to send someone round to see you. I shall want a social inquiry and a medical report. 4 weeks? I think we should have both these. And I think that someone should see her home.
Yes.
My grandson had croup.
Mrs. Lindley, we shall be sending someone round to see you.
Poor lady.
Number 17, Your Worship's an application for a summons. Mrs. Adams hasn't arrived. Apparently she's not very well.
Well, we're very short of time after that.
Number 18 is just for dangerous driving.
Let's have number 18 straight away.
Mr. Atkins, Mr. Stanley Atkins. Just count this way, please. Stand up there.